just do what you're doing. Just keep on doing it. Just have fun. Don't don't be so serious like on things. Have fun because there's some people that want to hear. I call it. They want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They want the controversy, and I'm not like that at all. I don't like. I want it to be positive.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine. I'm joined by the one and only Rob Wilkins from Coexisting on FightFul. So, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm glad to be here. You know how much I love your work and I adore you as a friend, so I'm glad to be here for you.
I'm really excited to chat with you again, my friend. So, we talked about this off camera, but for people that may not know, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh man, I was so young, and I remember the night that I saw it, like the night I remember seeing wrestling for the first time that I recall was seeing this giant of a man named Andre the Giant appear on my TV, or it
Mm.
was at a appear on TV. I looked at this man and I was just like, "What is that? Who is that?" And I was enamored ever since. I mean, there was some periods of time where I didn't watch it, but I've always loved wrestling. It's something that means everything to me, and it's it's just something that I sometimes wonder where I'd be without it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I've
definitely.
loved it. So uh I remember when I was a child watching it, obviously when I was just a young lad. And then there was a period of time where I didn't watch because sometimes you just get older and you miss things and you just stop watching and I got back into it when I was probably 13. Like I watched it till I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Um, and I got back into it when I was about 13 and just got hardcore into it, started tape trading, all kinds of fun stuff. And then I left again for a little while, like after when I went to college, because I was more interested in girls than I was
Yeah,
wrestling, paying attention to that, going to parties and doing stupid stuff like that. And then I realized I missed wrestling too much. Like that was me. And I got back into it and I just here I am.
that's very, very cool, my friend. So you talked about where you would be without wrestling there, and that's something I'm always curious to talk about with my guests. On days that you do get burned out of wrestling, because obviously with your job with Fightful, which we will get to in a bit, you obviously have to pay attention to a lot of wrestling. So what do you tell yourself on those days that you're like, I love wrestling, but this is
Yeah. And I just had one of those days last week where it was just to the point where I need a break from it. I logged off everything for the whole day. I wasn't on Twitter much, and I just didn't. I just needed a break. I could not care less what was going on in the wrestling world that day. It was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still loved it. It's just I needed a break, and sometimes you have to give yourself a break in this stuff because you get bombarded with all kinds of like information. And
yeah.
the thing is it's funny when I'm hosting my show, like I'll forget what I'm trying to like who I'm trying to mention, like or if I remember their history, like I know it, but I just can't think of it on the fly sometimes.
Mm,
So there's so much like wrestling information that goes like into my head that I just can't remember at times. So when you're doing a live show, it just you just get so much information and sometimes that just bogs me down. And I think and I know you said we'll get into the Fightful stuff later, but I used to be really hard on myself about it because I'm like, I should know this. And then
mm,
after a while I would see like Sean Ross Sapp, like he would take Sundays off to go watch football at in Cincinnati. Cincinnati Bengals season ticket holder. He would take those days off, and I realized that okay, I don't need to be so hard on myself at all. Like I am hard on myself at times, but there was a moment where it came to the point where I just needed a break from it, and I started taking a weekly break. I mean,
Mm.
don't get me wrong, it's not 24/7, but there's times where you just need to get away from wrestling. And it happened.
You brought up Sean Rossap there, and like I said, we will get into the Fightful stuff in a second. But obviously, Sean, to you and I know this, is one of the legends of podcasting. So, what has Sean taught you when it comes to podcasting?
John's taught me to believe in myself. He's taught me to don't like he's taught me to be myself. That's the biggest thing. Be myself. And he's taught me that this is this is the best like job, like it is. It's I love what I do at FightFul.
Mm.
And I mean, he's taught me a lot. Like he's taught me basically media ethics as far as what to do, what not to do. He's made me a better writer. So he's made me so I mean that's the biggest thing that I take away. And he's a friend. So I I mean, granted, I went hardcore, like rooting for him for against his match against Shazza McKenzie last or
Mm.
earlier this month. He lost. I was disappointed at him. I mean, he could have done better, I think, but we we let it go. No, I'm kidding. But
Mm.
no, he's taught me so much, and it's a pleasure um, working with him and working for him and just being a friend.
That's very, very cool. You brought up there, we obviously talked about Sean there. So, how do you connect with the Fightful crew? How do you join the Fightful Faithful and things like that? I believe it's to do with the social media side, or is it the website?
Well, there's like when I started, it was just social media. Like I would do the Fightful Facebook stuff, the groups, the moderating stuff that nobody really wanted to do. And then I started I did a article. I started doing columns called selling the merch.
Mm.
And what it was is I would do columns on just all the different wrestling merchandise and stuff for collectors, people that collected or people that wanted shirts. I would do like articles on it. And I'm gonna bring that back in 2024. I'm gonna start doing it again
Oh,
because it's fun for me. I love that stuff, and that's how I got started. And then one day, our AW Dynamite writer ended up leaving Fightful for something else. Not, I think he got out of wrestling altogether, and
mm.
Sean was hiring for it. And it was 20 years since I used to cover wrestling. I used to cover Raw like on my own personal website, and nobody ever paid attention to it. So it was a long time since I did live results, and I said, "Hey, I would like to do it. Just give me at least a week to." The first week might be bad, and I might have to edit some stuff, but I would love to do it. And he gave me the chance. I started with AEW Dark, which was just one of the worst things to cover when you're
Why?
sitting there because the matches go so fast. And I was, again, hard on
Uh,
myself, thinking that I wanted to get the content out first. So after a while, I realized, you know, I would rather put out a good product than
mm.
mediocre products. So it was stuff like that. So I just worked myself up from AEW coverage to just filling in the back, setting up podcasts, doing whatever basically needed. I consider myself like a utility player. Um,
Mm.
just whatever's needed, I'm gonna do. And if I don't know how to do it, I'll learn how to do it. So I've been teaching myself YouTube thumbnails, editing podcasts, editing video, like on myself. Like I've trained myself to do that. And then I've just learned to get better at things or try to get better because I've learned that there's only one Mr. Perfect and his name's Kurt Hennig and
Yeah.
I'm not him. So I just try to not be so I want to be good at what I do, but I also need to be easier on myself. So
Mm.
I've stopped
And you need
trying
to
to be.
enjoy what you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked about how I get along with or how I connect with the other Fightful like people. Jeremy Lambert. I I love talking with Jeremy. He's a big hockey fan like I am. We don't talk hockey much because I hate his team. Because my team and his team are rivals, but I
Mm.
like we like basketball. We don't. The thing is Jerry's so busy that we don't get to talk as much as we used to. I mean, the guy is, in my opinion, the hardest working
Oh yeah.
writer in the business. I mean, you go if you were to count how many articles he has on Fightful, it would take you probably 3 days to count them all. I mean, that's how
Mm.
hard he works. Plus, he has a family, and he's a hell of a dad. He, I mean, yesterday he he basically said, "Hey, I got to take my daughter to ballerina practice. I think or dance, one of those two." And he just he he puts his family first, and but he's very good at his work too. So it's one of those things where I admire the guy. I don't want him to see this, so but no,
It may
he's a
be
great guy.
clipped. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
No,
I
that's
may
fine.
clip it.
He's a great guy. He's somebody I really do love working with, and I mean, there Robert D. Felice, hard worker. He's very good at his job. Very smart, like very smart guy, and
Very.
yeah, it's and a great guy. So just everybody at Fightful's been great. Colin, who is one of our writers, is very smart. We have Corey, who just started with us.
Yeah.
From he came over from Body Slam, and he's been great. And then we have just just a great crew, you know.
Yeah. Who
And
is
that's just the
someone?
writing team.
Oh yeah. Who is someone from Fightful that you're like, I'd love to do shows with them more often?
Ooh, you know, it's probably man. There's so many people that I would love to do shows with. Me and so I mean, I mean that's the thing. I love doing shows. There's so many people that I would love to do a show with. Just, I mean, Sean. I think me and Sean would have a great show. Jeremy and I would have a great show. Presta is somebody that I love working with.
Yeah.
She's just we have a good time, and a Joel Pearl is somebody that I would like to do a show with again. We used to do some Fightful reviews, and we haven't done one in a while, and he's somebody. And then Kate Hensler, or you're gonna have to edit that part, my friend. Kate,
Yeah.
um, Kate Faye, Kate Fate, Kate Faye, babe. Just edit this whole part, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, um, like Kate, she's somebody I would love to do more podcasts with. We have a great dynamic. I would love to do one without like everybody that works at Fightful. I would do a podcast with. That's how I feel about them.
Hmm.
I mean, that's exactly how I feel about
What about outside of Fightful? Who do you look at and you're
them. Ooh,
like, they do some great work. I'd love to work with them.
I would well work with them. There's a lot. John Alba is somebody that I would like to work with. Uh, man, there's so many names that come up. Somebody that I would like to just talk to would be Chris Van Vliet. Like
Hmm.
for a while, he would be somebody that I would love to interview and just talk to. Uh, Even Brian Alvarez is somebody that I'd like to talk to for a little bit just know about him and talk to him. And there's just so many great people out there. Malcolm, he's good. I love working with SP3. I would do a show with him in a heartbeat. Just there's so many great people, and I feel bad because I know I'm gonna forget people. But like even you, we've done a show together before, and
Oh yeah.
I like working with you because we have that age difference. I don't know how old you are. I'm 41, so I think we
25
have
nearly.
yeah, so we have a 16-year age difference, and I get to like learn what you watched when you were younger, and you get to hear
Hmm.
what I watch. So there's a pretty good dynamic there, and there's just so many people that I would love to do podcasts with, and I mean both Alexes of FightFul, just and are somebody I'd love to, or two people I'd love to do podcasts with. Cam Hawkins, we do a show. We haven't done one in a while, but we have a show that we're gonna do again here soon. And he's somebody that I absolutely love working with.
Mm.
But
How did that
there's
come
just
about with Cam?
I just flat out asked him because Cam is somebody I followed on Twitter, pretty much the same, probably almost as long as I followed Sean, if not maybe a little bit longer. And I've just always liked Cam because he's very honest.
Mm.
He's very honest. He doesn't he he obviously is one of the smartest guys that I know when it comes to wrestling. But what I like about him too is he lives life. You know what I mean? He is not all. He likes to have fun. That's the biggest thing. He's
Yeah.
smart. He has fun, and I've just always liked him. He's funny, and we have a lot in common. You know, comic books. I don't get to read comics like I used to, but I still know my stuff, and we're both huge 1990s X-Men cartoon fans. So you
Cool.
know, so we go back.
Very, very cool. You brought up earlier feeling burned out and just needing a day to be like, I need to come off the hamster wheel, is the way I refer to it
Oh,
sometimes.
sure, yeah.
And so, what do you do? Like maybe the day before, if you're trying to avoid burnout, what do you do to sort of say, Rob, we're feeling burned out. How do we stop this?
Well, last week, so I'll give you an example. The day that I was burned out, I'm like, okay, take a breath. What makes you happy? And one thing that we always talk about in our DMs is movies. We're
Oh,
both big
there.
movie guys, and I watched. I went back to my childhood and watched Home Alone. I told myself I'm going to watch
I went to
Home
the
Alone.
cinema to see that today, funny enough.
Oh, really? Nice. I watched Home Alone and watched Home Alone 2, and I just told myself right before, like, okay, tomorrow just and do what you like. Watch movies. So I watched Home Alone 2, and I went and saw Silent Night, the new John Woo movie with
Yeah.
Joel Kinnaman. I went and saw that. So I watched three movies that day, and I was good to go the next day because I didn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I live and breathe wrestling, but sometimes you just need to take a break from it. And I did what I love to do. I watched movies the next day.
How important are your love of movies to help you balance your love of wrestling?
Oh man, that's a great question because movies, because and I know we'll talk about this. Movies help like I have depression, which I have not shy.
You've been very open.
Yeah, very open about my depression. What I love about movies is I forget my problems that I have. Like it's an hour and a half or 2 hours, sometimes longer, of peace for me because my
Mm.
mind is not anywhere else other than the movie usually. Like that's that's what I'm watching and I don't think like about the other stuff. So that's helped. But ever since I was a child, like movies have just fascinated me. I remember I lived in a small town in Texas where I went to the same movie. I think I saw The Sandlot probably 10 times in the theater when I was younger because it was at our local theater. It cost $2 to go in. I would go there in the afternoon, ride my bike, or get a ride to the theater. It's just been a big part of my life. Just movies in general. And I've been lucky to live within walking distance of movie
Mm.
theaters when I was younger. When I moved to Tallahassee, Florida, after living in Texas, I had two theaters within a mile from where I lived. So I went to movies all the time. And that was the funny thing. And my parents had no way. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have cell phones. So my parents knew if I wasn't outside playing basketball or they couldn't find me, I'd leave a note and say, oh, he's at the movies.
Ah,
I've seen so many movies. I've seen so many like bad movies and stuff like that. Movies that nobody else saw in the theater, it seems like. So I love movies. So
I'd love to see you on an episode of Get the Flick Out with Kate and Alex. I'm not gonna lie.
I would do that. I would definitely do that.
Mm. So you talked about obviously your love of movies and the fact that you use them when you're burned out of wrestling. So what would you do if someone came to you and was like, "I want you to cover movies"? Is that something you'd be able to do, or is it a thing where you're like,
Well,
"No, I need this to maintain my sanity," for lack of a better
no,
word? I couldn't think of
I
the
would
word there.
definitely do a show about movies. The only thing is I don't know if people would like me doing it because my brother, my little brother, he says I'm the worst movie critic of all time because I like every movie I watch.
Mm,
And the thing is I go into a movie wanting to like it. I mean, anybody that watches the movie, they want to like it. And if I'm entertained, it was a good movie. That's the way I look at it. I don't go into a movie looking to critique it. I look to see if I enjoyed it. If I enjoyed it, I consider it a great movie, or a good movie, not a great movie. Like, so, uh, for a movie to be a great movie for me, we're talking like The Departed from Martin Scorsese. We're talking Saving Private Ryan, movies like that.
oh,
So, like those are my great movies. But good movies are ones that just entertain me. I mean, I I think the movie that I did not like, the last one I saw, like none of them come to mind. I remember, I think Battlefield Earth was probably the worst thing I've ever seen in the
yeah,
theater. That was just
it's
absolutely
bad.
awful.
That is a
And
terrible film, to be fair.
there's probably other ones that, but that's the one I remember the most where it's just that was a waste of time. And so I just love film. It's me. I worked at a Blockbuster video store for 2 years and I rented so many movies. I mean, it was movie, movie, movie. And I don't watch as many as I used to because I'm busier with wrestling stuff and just outside activities. But yeah,
You talked about there being busy with wrestling stuff. So how does Rob maintain his wrestling fandom and make sure I still love wrestling? Is there any matches you're like, I'm gonna sit and watch this to remember why I'm a fan, etc.
uh, oh, great. I go back and watch when I need to remind myself why I'm a fan. I'll go back and watch Bret Hart versus Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13. I'll go back and watch Bret Hart uh, when basically 1991 SummerSlam against Mr. Perfect's one of my favorite matches of all time. I usually go back and watch Bret Hart, or I'll watch some like ECW stuff. Um, I'll watch uh, some Cactus Jack because
Mm,
that Cactus Jack Mick Foley is what got me into the more of the hardcore stuff like back in the day. So I go back and watch that. The stuff that got me into tape trading, the Terry Funk stuff and um
mm,
even like younger ROH days, Impact. I mean, I still AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels and Samoa Joe's one of my favorite matches of all time. I'll tell anybody to watch that triple threat match. And that I'll go back and watch that. I go back and watch that one twice a year at least. And the thing is there's somebody out there that's eventually going to go through the same thing with me and say like I watch Kenny Omega matches or I watch Will
yeah.
Ospreay matches because that helps them. And somebody that I write down the matches I absolutely love, or like, well, I type them now in Google Docs, and I make sure I remember them to go back and watch them. At least try to watch them at least once a year. And this year, I think I've put Will Ospreay in my list like 7 times,
Mm,
7 or 8 times, and that's just matches I can remember. So it that's what I do to make sure I remember why I love this stuff. And I'll watch like The Rock cut promos, go back to those days. And
mm. So how did I was trying to find a segue there. Talking of stuff you love, obviously we talked last time I had you and your great co-host Maggie on that podcasting in your own words was your drug. This is what you love and things like that. So what is it about podcasting that you're like, I love this?
I love talking to people like about wrestling. So I feel even though it's just me and Maggie doing the show, there we have people in our chat, like Ryan of the Mark Order podcast, Doc, Chris Mueller of Bleacher Report, and uh, a guy named Soupy who does a lot of great stuff for us. He promotes us really well. He's just an absolute great guy, a good friend, and we're talking to like people. D'Lo Diggs, who's a wrestler out of South Dakota. I mean, we just have different people that go in, and I make sure to be entertaining for them, but I also make sure that we're entertaining for people that come in and watch our show.
Mm,
Because I don't want to basically focus on other people in the chat. I want everybody to enjoy us, and I usually let Maggie do her thing, and that works. And I try to get my thing in and try to have fun with Maggie. Try to sometimes get her going, or I know what can like I know how to get Maggie going. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah.
it's fun for me because she's a great friend of mine. She's one of my best friends, and um, I love doing the show with her, and it it became a it became like doing that show became a love of mine. Like
Mm.
we Friday is my favorite day of the week. Like just
Mm.
get me to that 2 o'clock and I'm ready to go.
You talked about there Friday being your favorite day of the week and great things about Maggie. So how we've done this the wrong way round. That's just the way the conversation's flown. How did coexisting come about in your words and things like that?
Well, there was a time that we were doing. It was like some of the early days of the FightFul watch-alongs, which we taken a break from again. Um, this this woman came in there, and she was hilarious. She was funny. She was she was somebody like I wanted to know. She just had that kind of. There was something about her that just I thought she was great, and I said, that's the kind of person I would want to do a podcast with.
Mm.
So after SummerSlam 2021, that was when they were in Las Vegas, and she, I was because Joel Pearl would host our watch-alongs. He was actually at that SummerSlam, so I got to run the watch-along that night, and I had uh, Maggie and uh, Jussie out of Australia was with us, and for the life of me, I can't remember who else was with me on like during that podcast, but she was hilarious. And about a week after that, I sent her an email and said, I don't know if you've ever had interest in doing a podcast, but I'm I want to do a podcast, and I think you would be absolutely awesome at it. And she said that she didn't know because she wasn't comfortable, and she said to just give her some time to think about it, and I did. It was she she got back to me like right around full gear of 2021. So I mean
Mm.
that's about a 3 month like time frame, and she said I'm in, and we started doing the show, and the rest was history. So I just knew like when I saw her on the podcast, there's something about this woman that's just she's great. So I wanted to do a podcast with her, and if she said no, then I would have tried to find somebody else, but I knew there was just going to be a dynamic there. Like there was something about her that I knew would work for us, work for Fightful, and
Mm.
it was good.
You talked about there just knowing there's going to be a dynamic there. Some people, like I've heard this analogy all the time from Chris Van Vliet, from other podcasters, which is like, we might be funny when we're talking about the game around sitting around at the bar, but that doesn't make a podcast. So, how did you know Maggie and your good self would make a great podcast overall and weren't just funny off camera? I'm trying to think of the word. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't really know. That's a great question because I just had it was just a gut feeling. Like I just had a feeling because she was what stood out about me with Maggie is she was different. She 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 said what was on her mind, and the other thing too is there weren't as many there weren't as many podcasts with where it was a guy and a girl doing podcasts, a wrestling podcasts. There just weren't as many as there are now. And I knew the one thing that I wanted to do, like from the get go, is I wanted to be different
Mm,
than many other podcasts. And it just that was my first thing. My first thing was be different. How because you want to somewhat stand out, so you have to be different. So I did that was my first step. And then I said Maggie would be perfect because you have a guy that lives in the States and you have a person that lives in Europe, a woman that lives in Europe. I mean, the chances of a European and a guy from the European woman and an American guy doing a podcast about wrestling. What are the odds? Like
yeah,
it was different. It was so step one was completed. Like that was the goal, and then Sean liked the idea because it was something different. Because that was the thing. Fightful was still growing and still was growing, and that was something that I knew that if I wanted to do a podcast, what was going to be different uh, than what they already had. And I wanted to do a show on Fightful Select because it would give value to Fightful.
yeah,
And it was, and again, the biggest thing, it was different. And when I told Sean who my co host was going to be, he was all for it. Like, he's like, yep, you're in. Absolutely. You're in. Let's do this. And Maggie and I did our first show over 2 years ago this past week. And I did recently watch that first show again, and my goodness, I cringe a lot. But
mm,
I was also proud of myself because how far I've come and how far Maggie has come, like with it, and yeah,
yeah. You talk about how far you've both come there. What are some things that if you could say to Rob and Maggie of 2 years ago, this is what we should do now? And then what are some
um,
things that you're like, I like what we did in that first episode, let's keep that.
I think what I would say is just do what you're doing. Just keep on doing it. Just have fun. Don't don't be so serious like on things. Have fun because there's some people that want to hear I call it they want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They want the controversy. And I'm not like that at all. I want it to be positive. I want things to be good. And that was the thing. Like, Maggie and I wanted a positive podcast. I mean, are there things that we don't like in wrestling? Absolutely. But the one thing that I've taught myself too, since I've been in this industry, is I don't put down wrestlers like
Yeah,
at all. I that's the only time like I'll do that is if they do something personal, like out of their personal lives. That's just like what the hell are you doing type thing.
yeah,
That like I don't, but that's anybody. But I, as far as like doing anything different, I don't really know because I like what we do. Um, we have our Cooper Effect segment where we talk about one thing outside of wrestling. That's a usually it's outside of wrestling. That's a um, very positive story, whether it's about animals or something somebody does that's just great. We talk about that. That's our usually our non wrestling story that we do, and that was very important to Maggie that we do something to spread positivity, and
yeah.
that's why we're coexisting because we coexist so well.
Mm. So you talked about their coexisting so well and things like that. What advice would you have for people that want to start a podcast? Maybe are hitting the brakes for some reason. What would your advice be?
Believe in yourself,
Mm,
do it, just do it. Don't if you need a break, take a break, but don't forget who you are and why you want to do it. If you don't think it's worth it, ask yourself, like write down some reasons why you don't think it's worth it, and then write down some reasons why you do think it's worth it. And I guarantee you, you'll usually most people will come out with more reasons to do it. And that's the thing. Uh, one thing I'm off. I think we're all our biggest critics to an extent.
Oh,
You know.
100%.
So that was the thing. I'm harder on myself than I am on others, and I think I'll just tell people don't be so hard on yourself. Just live it up, have some fun, do what you want to do, create content, try to be different though.
Mm. I see what you're saying completely there. But as we look at wrapping this up soon, my friend, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we
Oh,
are going to do
I'm free, so go ahead.
very cool. But we are going to do a segment that you may have seen before, as you've been on the channel before, but I can't remember if I was doing it when I had you on the channel last time. It's called generic questions. Those of you that have
Okay.
seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view or event, favorite tag team, favorite theme song, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions that I assume Rob gets asked on social media. So now he'll have a place to be like, guys, I have answered this. Please go watch this. So, what's your favorite match of all time?
Okay. Then this probably changed. Like, if you have asked me this, it's probably changed. But I always go back to what got me just the moment that got me actually hooked into like just loving wrestling was probably just what like I think it was when I rented a tape at a video store and I watched Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam '91. I always
Mm,
go back to that because that's the match that I remember like getting my attention. And it was the first tape I've ever like recorded. I got a friend's VCR and I taped it. I double taped it and that way I had my own copy. Nobody tell Blockbuster
yeah,
video. I don't think you can.
nah.
So that was that was the first tape. That was my first tape that I ever had, uh, and I watched that match so many times, and that's the one I go back to.
What about your favorite pay per view or event? As in, like Double or Nothing 2019, for
Mm,
example.
man, um, ooh, great question because there's been so many good ones. I think I really, really enjoyed Royal Rumble 2020. Was that when Edge came back?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that was probably one of my see, and that it's hard because there's so many great ones. I mean, I enjoyed Forbidden Door 2 this year a lot. That was
Mm,
one of my favorite pay-per-views. But I think from an emotional standpoint, I would have to say Royal Rumble 2020 when Edge came back
mm.
because that I was an Edge guy. After Bret Hart retired, I was a big fan of Edge. And when he came back, like I that was just a big emotional day for me because one of my favorite basketball players died that day too. Kobe Bryant died
Oh, was that the
that
same day?
yeah, it was the same day. So I was already kind of
Wow.
like in a down mood that day watching that show. And when Edge came out, I was so happy. I mean, I was so happy. And one of the very few times, I don't admit it much, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I actually had some tears because I was so incredibly happy
Mm.
to see him come back. And uh yeah, so I would have to say from an emotional standpoint, but also when the like another good time is I remember the good times, like the moments like that made me like
Mm.
my jaw drop. And that was when the Hardys came back to WrestleMania
Mm.
with that crowd going nuts. And like another moment's seeing CM Punk come back to Survivor Series. That's a moment I won't forget. And I'm so happy he came back too because I I just think he's more WWE than he was AEW. That's my opinion. I think he does. I think I wanted him in WWE. That's where I how I felt.
I see what you're saying. What about your favorite theme song?
Oh, I'm really into Shinsuke Nakamura's music is good. Um, I love his. There's just something about that music. But I really like Brian Danielson's new one, new like version that I
Mm,
think Mikey Ruckus did. I think it was Mikey. I really love that. I like FTRs to an extent. It makes me feel like I'm watching an old '80s movie, like that.
yeah.
It sounds like it's a '80s soundtrack. So, but that's the thing about music too. It's just music plays a big part. But I would have to say right now Shinsuke or even AJ Styles. I like AJ's music too, but I'll go with Shinsuke for now.
What about your favorite tag team?
Favorite? Well, I'm gonna say somebody other than the Hart Foundation because you can tell I'm a huge Bret Hart guy. Um, I really love FTR, but
Mm,
I would say FTR, but there's yeah, I'll go with FTR right now, and that could change because wrestling evolves, and right
yeah.
now FTR is fun to watch. The Briscoes are up there. I've always enjoyed the Briscoes, and
Mm,
but I would say FTR
mm.
for
You
now.
brought up FTR and the Heart Foundation there. So what we do sometimes on this show, Rob, when people say two answers, is we fantasy book it. We have a
Okay.
DeLorean. You can book it any era, uh any match type, any arena. Both teams are in their prime. Where's FTR versus the Heart Foundation?
Well, because I know I would be there, I would put them at the Target Center in Minneapolis. That's where I would put them because that's what I consider my home arena. So I've seen great matches there: Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page, Finn Balor versus AJ Styles. I've seen great matches there. Uh, I've the Shield versus the Wyatt family, one of their best matches. So I've seen some great matches there. Stone Cold versus The Rock, or excuse me, Stone Cold versus Triple H versus Mankind with Jesse Ventura as a special guest referee. I've seen some classic matches in that place. Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair. So uh, that's where it would take place. Would I would prefer the match, believe it or not, to be at a house show because they
Mm,
can just do their own thing for a little bit about usually I think house show matches go from 10 to 20 minutes, usually somewhere in between. Give them enough time to have fun, do all their do all their moves that they want to do.
mm. Who goes over?
Hitman always goes over for me, Bret
Yeah,
Hart, and I guarantee you FTR, if Cash and Dax would watch this, they'd be absolutely 100% okay with me putting Bret Hart over them. I would
yeah,
think. So
yeah. Fair enough. And then finally, Rob, the biggest generic question, in my opinion, who is your favorite overall wrestler?
okay. So we already know who I'm gonna say. So I'll say name somebody else. AJ Styles,
Mm,
because obviously Brett's number one, but AJ Styles is number two for me. Um, because AJ was the guy that when I came back into getting into wrestling, that was the guy that like got me like hooked
mm,
for it. And then after AJ was, I used to not like John Cena at all. Like I hated that character. And then over time, it grew on me. I think as I got older, I'm like, this guy gets it. This guy
mm.
gets it. And that's the thing with me the one thing that this is something that I'll share. Something that I've realized as I got older and when I started with FightFul, I realized that the WWE is not booked. It's not set for me. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
designed for me. It's not geared for me. It's geared for kids and families. that's who it's geared for. And once I learned that, like once I figured it out and had my like aha moment, that's when the product got so much better for me. Now,
Yeah,
granted, I thought Vince was brutal towards the end because it was lazy booking in my opinion with a lot of what he did. And I mean that was not fun. That wasn't fun, but now that it's gotten so much better and like I share a story now about how Otis Otis, like WWE's Otis, there was a guy that does sports radio in Minneapolis, and he was talking about how his kid loves wrestling, and he said his favorite, like they asked who his son's favorite wrestler was, and he said Otis, and that surprised me because I was not expecting him to say Otis,
yeah,
but I realized when he said, like when he described it, he he explained why because Otis was just this funny guy that was on TV, and that's what kids like. And that's when I realized. And then a couple weeks later, I think it was Brandon Thurston put something out about it might not have been Brandon, but somebody put out something about a WWE focus group and how like kids' favorite wrestler, a lot of them was Otis, and
yeah.
that's when I realized this isn't for me. This is for them. And it got so much better. And I went to a house show this past Sunday night in Rochester, Minnesota, and there was a girl that was probably 11, 12 years old that sat in front of me, and her face all night, just smiling all night. That was the best part of the whole show for me was seeing how happy these kids were because
Mm.
that's what the show's about. It's not about me. I'm allowed to, absolutely. I love watching it, and it's just not. They're not designed for me. It's about that magic of what they do for the
Yeah,
families. Now I will say that I Disney movies, I'll give you an example, they're not designed for me either, but they at least make them entertaining for adults too. Like, so that's the way I wish WWE was like during the times. That's how I think WWE should be. That people should be able to enjoy it, but we have to remember that it's not for the internet like
yeah,
fans. Like it's for everybody. So if we don't get something or if we don't like the booking, I get it. But I also remember that it's not AEW is more geared for me, and I love AEW. I just love wrestling in general, but that's what did it for me. Like the just the kid aspect, just realizing what it meant, like trying to think of best way to say it, but just seeing what it does for other kids, like how I used to see it.
yeah.
It's just better for me now.
That's very, very cool, my friend. But as we wrap this up, Rob, the question I end this show on is I believe as content creators, we're all sort of gonna live forever in some sort of very strange way, if you think about the world. So what is one piece of content you're like, I'd like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, nah, please get rid of that?
Um, there. Okay, so the one that I did want to get rid of, I actually did get rid of. Um, and that was when I I broke my rule of not talking negative about a wrestler. And it had nothing to do with what they did in the ring. It
Mm.
was due to uh their business practice. And I was I was wrong. Not for what I said. I was wrong because I broke my own rule.
Yeah,
And so I just I just got rid of it. Like,
yeah.
I and nobody saw it because I think nobody ever saw it because that was when we were recording the show at the time. So nobody ever saw it, but um I knew I wasn't happy with it. So I put it out. So I got rid of it. I got rid of that clip, but that was probably the one. Other than that, I would probably say that the moments when my computer froze, like when I would do the show, there were a lot of times where I had a bad computer that just always acted up during
I
my
think it
show.
did it last time we did a show, which was on FightFul Select.
Yeah,
I think it happened last time.
but yeah, it wasn't good. Um, but since then I my cheap self just said the hell with it and finally bought a computer, like a better one. And those were the moments. I mean, we had Alex McCarthy on, who you've had on before, and my computer crapped out on me, and it was just ridiculous. It made me look unprofessional, even though it was funny.
Yeah.
And it was just, it made me feel unprofessional, especially being on Fightful. Like it was just, I had to be better. And I would say those times where my computer froze, I wish I could relive those moments to get rid of. As far
Mm-hmm.
as my favorite, actually had nothing to do with wrestling. It was, I mean, it was during coexisting. It was, um, saying like how I felt about, when I'm just like myself, like where I talk,
Yeah.
um, and I I'm trying to think of the way I want to say this. When basically when my guard's down and I'm talking just for me, like if I'm defending somebody or if, those are my favorite. Like those are my moments where it's just where I where I show the human side of
Mm.
things. That's, I mean, last year when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I was
Mm.
very emotional, and I talked about it on on the show. And granted, I hate that moment, but I'm proud of myself for doing it on the show, talking it out, letting people know what was going on with me. And I mean, it was powerful for me because I realized that I had a lot of people who I didn't know get in contact with me, and it just built me up like more than anything. It helped me when I needed it. And those are the moments. As far as like when the wrestling stuff goes in mind, I couldn't really tell you what there's a particular wrestling part of it because I have so much fun. I think the one thing that's hilarious is how bad I'm at predictions, my wrestling
Yeah.
predictions. I'm brutal. Like it's awful. I book because I'm doing predictions the way I would book it. So,
Yeah.
and I can't help it.
I know what you're saying completely there. But as we wrap this up, Rob, obviously I want to say thank you for coming back on. Thank you for a great conversation. But promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.? Because
You
it's
can
well
find
worth
me.
doing.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again. You can follow me at Rob Wilkins on X. I'm also on Instagram at Fight for Rob, on Threads at Fight for Rob. Every Friday at 3 o'clock Eastern, I host a great show called Coexisting with Rob and Maggie on Fightful Overbooked. I also do a show occasionally with Cam Hawkins, Seahawk, um, known on X. We do a show called My Point Is. We haven't done one in a while, but we will be doing one again soon. And then I'm on Fightful. Like I'm on Fightful's Twitter. I'm on Fightful's Facebook. I'm on Fightful's website. I help set up Grapsity for Phil and Reg. I do stuff like a lot of stuff you see that I do. You don't know I do it. So,
Yeah, I
and
know
that's
what you
fine with me because I like the background. I like doing the background stuff. I do the updates of the resources for Fightful. Like I update that all the time. I do the contracts. I add to the rosters. I delete from the rosters. I do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, which I absolutely adore.
and you do it very well, my friend. So
Oh, thank
as
you.
we wrap this up, obviously, if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash on YouTube. Follow me on X or Twitter at Tom Talk Trash, and I will see you in the next interview. Goodbye now.